Joining us now is CBC Sports columnist Morgan Campbell in Toronto and University of Victoria professor Dr. Christine Obansewin in Victoria. So nice to talk with you.
Hey, great to be here, Asha.
Christine, let's start with you. We are hearing lots about racism in sport today and over the course of a few weeks, a few months, you name it. But this has long been a problem everywhere. You've written about some incidents in our past. Tell us about them.
Yeah, this really has been a problem in Canadian history, Canadian sport history since the early days of this country. And so we can look back to the late 1900s, early 20th century and identify moments of racism directed towards Indigenous, Black, racialized athletes. And so there's many examples to draw from. One of the most famous examples in Canadian history is the racism experienced by Tom Longboat, the Onondaga runner from Six Nations of the Grand River, who accomplished much in his career, most notably winning the Boston Marathon in 1907. And a year later, when he failed to finish in the Olympics in 1908, he was marked by the Canadian press and Canadians as being, a racialized individual associated with his Indianness and being lazy and essentially a drunk Indian.
Wow. Christine, does racism, you think, deter people from pursuing professional sports, getting into those elite levels, especially when we're talking about the Olympics where, there isn't a whole lot of money to be made?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great question. I think that racism is at every level. It begins at access. And so the systemic racism that exists in our sporting structures, that just to access some of these leagues, whether the barriers are financial, whether for Indigenous communities, young Indigenous youth living in remote communities and not being able to access sport itself, and then the experiences of the athletes. I think there's so many levels to consider in terms of what might deter young athletes from pursuing sport. It could be the racist moments. I think there's so many high-profile athletes that we are learning about every day who speak about their experiences growing up in Little League or participating in various tournaments and the racism that they encounter there.
And Morgan, I want to ask you this as a sports journalist now. How does racism play out in the sports media world? Are there the same kind of barriers? And I ask this because of the recent controversies, I'm sure you know, about Rachel Nichols, who was caught saying that her Black colleague Maria Taylor was only covering the NBA Finals because she's Black. Or even Stephen A. Smith, who said an Asian player, superstar in MLB, needs to speak English.
Yeah, see now, but those are two situations that are specific to ESPN, and I don't know all of the politics that underlie them, but I do know this, right? With the Rachel Nichols situation, what you had was management not being clear with two really high profile on camera personalities about who was doing what and whose job it would be to host this countdown show. But again, the where it becomes racial is Rachel Nichols automatically defaulting to this idea that Maria is only getting a push because she's Black, and this is after Rachel Nichols has enumerated all the things that Maria Taylor does at this network. So Maria Taylor is clearly very good, but somehow when she gets promoted, it's only because she's Black. And the thing that really I found disturbing about that aspect of the conversation is she's speaking to an agent. She's speaking to a guy that represents LeBron James. He also represents Anthony Davis. This is an access gatekeeper that all aspiring superstar NBA journalists kind of need to have a good relationship with. And these two are kind of conspiring. I could talk all day about the numerous ways in which racism subtly and consciously seeps into the decisions that get made in terms of the sports media. But again, just the idea that no matter what kind of skill and initiative Maria Taylor showed, her colleague says she only gets ahead because she's Black says a lot.
All right, I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you.
Columnist Morgan Campbell in Toronto and University of Victoria professor Dr. Christine Obansewin in Victoria.